So we're talking a lot about the weather these days. So I've chosen this poem by Dana Folds entitled Weekend Forecast. The forecasters knew with uncanny exactitude just when yesterday's blue sky would fill with clouds. They issued a flood watch, predicted the amount of rainfall, pointed out the wide area over which the weekend storm would pass. Do you think they use a Ouija board? The whole meteorological staff huddled round a table, eyes following the heart-shaped plastic pointer beneath their fingers as it spells out R-A-I-N. Maybe it's a crystal ball, a man looking for all the world like Merlin with his beard, hired by the National Weather Service to gaze daily and interpret what he sees. Perhaps there is an expert team of dowsers, forked sticks pointed squarely at the sky, or an aged woman turning tarot cards over one by one and handing her forecast to the TV producer waiting by the door. I don't envy them their lot, those meteorologists, not even with fancy maps and flashing radar screens. Their job is to point out what we humans rarely want to see. There is little we control, and nothing stays the same for very long.
Oh, okay, nice. I love that.
Jenny?
Well, I love that poem because it connects with my themes. Awesome.
Yeah.
What's the last line again, Mary? Can you read that?
Sure. Their job is to point out what we humans rarely want to see. There is little we control, and nothing stays the same for very long.
Bingo. I think that's been and continues to be a life lesson for me. That the only constant in life is change. And sometimes that's really hard to swallow, you know? So I'm going to try and highlight that along with my commitment to growth and my need to just search and reach in my life. I am so grateful to have thought about this for you because it helps me slow down and take stock of what I've done after 53 years. And I'm honored to be considered an elder. I don't know if I quite fit that yet, but I'm going to share what I've done after 53 years. We'll see. May I have many more. So I'd like to start with growing up in a family of 9 people. I'm the oldest of 7 kids. And my parents, James Gaul, and Catherine Hayes, and married Gaul, married in 1967, and then I was born in 1969. And I started out, I was born in Buffalo, but then we moved to Liverpool, New York. And I have had the great gift to live in the same house through my entire childhood. One thing I think that was kind of interesting about our family is that my parents had, in our view as kids, kind of different families. My father's family, both my parents were what we'd say ethnic whites. They came immigrated in the 19th century, and both my parents were second generation in their family. So my father, his family was Polish American, and then some German and French. And we always connected with them that they were kind of loud and they smoked. And I remember one time going to play bingo with my grandmother, and I just, they made us laugh, and sometimes they made us crazy, but we love them so much. So we often talked about as family, especially between siblings and us siblings, that, oh, that's your Gaul side coming out. But we also had a Hayes side, which was my mom's side, which was Irish American and a very Catholic family, although my father's family is Catholic as well, but quiet, hardworking, kind, patient. One of my aunts was a sister of the Carondelet. And, we always treasured the Hayes side because we were, kind of in touch with that kind, quiet, calm side. And that's kind of how my parents were kind of foils for each other. So I do have a little anecdote of going to both my grandmother's houses. Whenever we went to my grandmother Gaul's house, it felt like I was going into kind of a castle, because she had these tall, kind of velvety yellow chairs. I always thought they looked like thrones, and her house was just filled with this kitsch that was just very luxurious, but it kind of wasn't luxurious because it's almost like they were trying to make it look luxurious, but it wasn't exactly, because they were middle-class folks. But then going to my grandmother Hayes's house, it was just a beautiful old house, and there was always a little jar of M&Ms that we could eat. And I remember going to have Sunday dinner with her, and we'd all kind of fall into the house, loud kids, 6, 7 kids at the time. And, but we just loved sitting down to have baked chicken with paprika on it and French fries and peas. That was the best part. That was just one of the best parts of going to see grandma. And she made the same thing every time, but it was so delicious. And then we had a lovely bakery just next to my grandma's house where we could buy these fabulous butter crunch cookies. They were like this big. And they always came in one of those brown pastry boxes. And it was so exciting when you get to grandma's and there'd be a brown pastry box. We'd be taking that box home. And usually, because she lived in Cortland, and usually we're eating the butter crunch cookies on the way home from driving down from Syracuse. So that was kind of an interesting part of our culture. And another aspect of our family, my family I grew up in, was that it was a fairly traditional family. My father was a lawyer and very much dominant. He was a very dominant man and strong man. And my mother began working as a nurse. She went to college for nursing. And then when I came along, she chose to do work at home and was working at home and raising children until her late 40s, when she started to work as a school nurse again. So the culture was very much, my father was in charge, and he was one of the biggest teachers in my life because he had many sides. He could be very scary, but he also was a very smart man and a caring man, and cared a lot for people. He would do pro bono work for people who needed wills. And on the other hand, he worked 80 hours a week. So we weren't seeing him as much.
Jenny, excuse me.
Yeah.
Could you just tip your monitor a little bit? Because we keep losing the bottom of your the other way. Oh, there, that's better. Thank you.
I'm doing what my mom does. So that was something that I really, helped me grow in my life, to work out my relationship with my father. So there were a couple times when things were really scary with my dad. But there were also times where he spoke to me, and I will always remember talking to him about human rights in our basement. Sorry, I'm getting a little gefellt here, verklempt. And also I remember him, while it felt like a very patriarchal house, he always supported me. He supported me to play basketball in a boys' league when no other girl could play basketball there. And sorry, you guys, I'm a little emotional right now. Let me get myself down here. So along with this, being in this home, I was the oldest of 7, so I felt a lot of responsibility. And that has taught me a lot too, about the relationship between responsibility and feeling like I'm enough. So I think changes started to happen for me as I moved into my youth, and strived to be the best student I could absolutely be, and also explored athletics like basketball and crew and golf and softball. And I think particularly as an athlete, that was something that really helped me find who I was and feel strong and confident, especially there. So I remember one time in when I was doing crew, which is a sport where you're sitting in a long boat and you have these long oars, and we're rowing down lakes and doing races. And I remember that I was in a JV crew shell, and I was in a race in Occoquan, Virginia. And I'll never forget being on that water, and we were all rowing at the same time, and we were it was a synchronicity. And that's, I guess, one of the first times where sorry, you guys. Whew. That was one of the first times where I realized how much I wanted to explore what it meant to be in flow, to be so alive that I recognize everything happening all at the same time. And it was an amazing moment. I'll never forget it, because we were all in sync. And when the coxswain told us to stop, because we had done this thing they called a kamikaze 10. And it was when you went with your rowing group and you rowed as hard as you could for 10 strokes. And after those 10 strokes, we had to lift our oars up, and you could feel, it was like a moment of grace, because I could feel we were all connected, and I could feel the crew shell rowing on the water, and it was so moving. So that has been a big theme for me, how to find flow in my life, how to find that moment where I am connected to it all and I'm in the present. So, and then further on in my youth, I remember other moments of that flow with athletics were playing basketball. And again, my father, he was quite a basketball player in his youth, and he pushed me to play on this boys basketball team. And then later on, I went to play JV basketball. And I really excelled to a degree. And then it rolled around as a sophomore. I tried to play basketball, and I met up with a coach that really I didn't like. And I'll never forget just feeling so scared and overwhelmed by this coach. And I remember having a talk with my mother, and she said, you know, Jenny, you don't have to finish this. But I decided to finish because I didn't want to quit. So I finished that whole season. And then I went on to try other sports like crew, and I did golfing when I was a senior in college. That was a blast. When I was a senior in high school. So I think there was a lot of formative stuff for me doing athletics as in my youth, and also doing music. I started playing violin when I was in 3rd grade, and played violin all the way through my freshman year of college at University of Rochester. That's how I came to Rochester. And it was something that taught me discipline. And I think discipline's been an interesting value for me, because I do value discipline. And yet in my work, I realized that it's not always responsive to students. So I've been learning a lot about what it means to be disciplined and when that can't be helpful. So I'll get into that more when I talk about my work journey. I remember my father, when I started playing violin, when maybe I was 4th grade, I was practicing, and he told me he thought it sounded like a dying cat. But, you know, he always expected all of us to play instruments. That was a little press for all of us. He had good luck with the first 3 of us who played. My brother played trombone, my sister played oboe and went on to be a musician, and I'd play violin. And then everybody else, by the time we got around to my younger brothers, Timothy, Luke, and then my youngest sister, Abby, and Josh, they didn't always follow what my dad was hoping for. So they ended up playing some instruments, but not kind of the ones he hoped or had the path that he planned for them. But I'll always remember playing violin. I got a little better than a screechy cat. I always remember playing violin when I was a sophomore. There was just a wonderful friend I had, and we would stand before school started. We'd stand in the music room and play violin duets. And again, I had that flow moment, that moment of just being there and making something or experiencing something. Yeah, and I went on to keep messing around with singing and continue to do that. I just find it a wonderful practice. I think it's a spiritual practice. It's a practice of breathing. You know, I'd love to say I'm a fabulous diva. I'm not, but I do enjoy singing and trying to find a way to get that flow, to have it feel open and free. And I've enjoyed taking lessons through the gig line at Eastman. I've studied with several Eastman graduates and just learned so much from these young, fabulously talented and skilled musicians. It's been a really great experience doing that. So I told you a lot about my early family. I did want to mention, I love that you guys are really into poetry, because I love poetry too. And particularly the poem "To Be of Use" by Mary Oliver. I don't know if you've ever heard of that poem, but I know I don't have a whole lot of time, but when I think of my mother, I think of that poem. So take a look at that poem, because that really speaks to me when I think of my mom. All right, so I think why I'm touching some feelings here is because my father did pass away quite a while ago, but now I'm having thought about him to prepare this. I think I'm experiencing a little grief about it. And he passed away quite a while ago, but it's amazing how it kind of stirs things up when you think about it again. But when he died, this is something I'll never forget, that amidst all the pain that I've worked on, through my relationship with my father, he died of Alzheimer's. When I went to see him the last time before he passed, and I saw him just in the throes of death and dying, and I just felt such love. Any anger or pain that I'd suffered when I saw my father, it just left, and all I felt was love. And I guess I learned from that love conquers all. It was just, that was a flow moment because I was there. I wasn't thinking about anything else. That was powerful. All right, so now to another powerful thing. My fabulous love of my life, Suzanne Morgan. We started our family before children by being in a play where I was an Athenian man who was very excited. And we used well, anyway, I'm not going to go into it, but we showed he was very excited in this play. It was a play by Aeschylus called Trojan Women. And we were part of a small theater group. And Sue played Kalanika, who was this very attractive Trojan woman. And I remember being in that play and just getting to know her and realizing that how much I was attracted to her, and we continued to grow together as a partners. And I remember one time she came, one of the first times we actually spoke to each other, and were, it wasn't the first time we spoke to each other, but the first time we were kind of truthful to each other about how we felt. And it was on Oakland Street, right across the screen door between my apartment, and she was standing outside. And I remember telling her that, and it was so freeing and at the same time scary, because again, going back to father stuff, my father was quite homophobic. So it was quite a journey to open up to the feelings I felt for Sue, and also realize that I was going to be telling my parents this and coming to terms with it. The thing that cracked me up the most about this whole thing, there were some things of coming out to my parents that were so hard and scary. But the thing that cracked me up was when I told my siblings, they said, "Oh yeah, we knew that, Jenny." So they already knew. They could already tell that this was part of my journey. So it took a long time for my father to accept Sue. And I wouldn't say it was a perfect change around for him. But when the kids came along, when my daughters Katie and Eleanor came along, that softened him a bit. And he would sneak them crackers, and he loved to give them treats when we arrived at home, because Sue and I were trying not to give them too much sugar, but there was my dad always handing them a cookie, So he did soften after a while. So my mother was once again that patient, open mom that I love. And she joined PFLAG. She really wanted to figure out how she could, understand this new part of me. So I felt good support from her. All right. Oh, so our family now, I'm sure my teenage daughters might have different feelings about me, but overall, I just feel that we have mother love at my house. We've got warmth, it's goofiness and happy. And I'm just so grateful to build this life with my sweet love, Sue Morgan. And I want to say that Katie and Eleanor, since they were born, have been wonderful teachers of mine. Certainly my parents have been teachers. Sue has taught me so much in my life. And I think the girls have taught me how to be patient, have challenged me to learn how to let go and find gentleness, especially as parents, because, you know, I grew up in a way that set me up to be really about perfectionism. I think as a white woman and in our dominant white culture, we want everything perfect all the time. And I think being a parent has helped me just face that I'm probably going to get 10% of my choices as a parent right. And the other times are not going to be right. And I just have to keep moving on, you know? So one thing more recently that I've continued to learn about, and that's something else I feel so excited about, is at 53, that I've got so much more to learn. This idea of people being neurodivergent. And not too long ago, Sue kind of self-diagnosed herself as having ADHD, ADD. And, you know, we also look at now how Eleanor and Katie might tend toward that kind of presentation of how they think and what works for them. And I definitely don't fall into that category. So I have learned so much about what folks who are neurodivergent can need and use. And I've applied it now into my teaching with the young children that I work with. And I'm just still on a great path for learning about what that means. And I'm grateful for that. All right, so that was, I think I've gotten into a little bit of my spiritual journey as I kind of touch into these big feelings that I have, but I think that's kind of what has pushed me through my life. And it began with having big feelings that often have led to me kind of holding them in and then experiencing a lot of anxiety. So in the attempt to just be able to face my anxieties a little better, I have had many teachers to help me along in that journey. And one of them has been a therapist who I realize I've worked with for over 20 years. And I'm just so grateful to have worked with him. And I think one thing that we've worked on is about how to face my own feelings of panic about, you know, am I enough? Which again is another kind of white dominant norm that we have. And also to deal with failure. And I have grown so much in those. And I'm so proud of the work I've done with him. I have a funny story though about my search for how to deal with big feelings and all this. I decided, I was so angry one day and I decided, well, I'm just gonna go somewhere and I'm gonna scream and, you know, let it all out like I've been learning with my therapist, you know. So I walked downtown and I was looking around for a place where I could just, you know, get crazy and scream and yell and let out my feelings. And so I found kind of an open parking lot downtown. And as I started doing this, you know, what I thought was kind of a catharsis, I heard some crackling stones behind me, and I heard a car rolling up to me, and it was a police car. And I was mortified. And the guy opened the door and he said, "Are you okay?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm doing okay." And he said, "Are you?" Because we got a call that someone was yelling and screaming. I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I'm doing all right now. I think I'm gonna walk home." So I just trying all sorts of different things, and that was a funny, crazy moment where I knew that, boy, I'm never gonna kind of do catharsis in the middle of a parking lot in Rochester. I think I'll skip that one. And then, of course, coming to yoga. I have been studying yoga for about 20 years. And sorry. My teacher has been Francois from Open Sky, and he has had quite a life. He now lives in France, so I don't see him very much anymore, but I did have the opportunity last spring and summer to complete a yoga teacher training with him. So that I'm really excited about that. And it was a wonderful journey. It was all online, which is not what I had hoped for, but it's really helped me continue my practice and to continue looking for that time of flow and how to be flexible and yet have stability as I live my life. And I love how yoga teaches that. And I hope someday soon I can start setting up a way to attempt to teach yoga with others people, to teach yoga and have classes with other people. And I've been working now for about 20 years as an ENL teacher, and there are some things in my teaching in schools that have become really easy, or not so easy, but I'm used to it. And I just see this chance to be a yoga teacher as a whole new aspect of teaching that I could discover and work on. So I'm excited about that. I want to move back a little bit to the culture of my family again, because we had expectations when we went to church and practiced in our Catholic church in Liverpool, New York. And one of them was my dad felt we always had to wear dresses and we had to get dressed up to go to church. My brothers would, they'd have their hair perfectly combed and they'd have nice ties. And we always had to have a skirt or a dress on, at least when we were younger. He got a little more flexible as we went on, but I remember that the times getting ready for church, you think you're going to church to sort of find peace, but boy, it was a stressful time to get ready to go to church in our house, especially because people didn't always want to go, and we'd pile all in the car and we'd get there and finally we'd make it to church and we'd sit. And luckily there was kids' religious education, so sometimes we could go off and do other things while my parents were in the main sanctuary following mass. But when I got to it was just something totally different, and it was so simple, everybody, but I loved that I could wear jeans to church. It just meant so much to me. Like, I wear a sweatshirt, I loved it. And as I've moved into it, I just am so grateful for the fabulous religious education that we offer at First U. It's been, I think, really powerful for my daughters, and I've been able to help with it. And I really find Sheila's shoes so inspiring. And let's see. One other thing that particularly my partner Sue has taught me about is that humor is important. And I think that I can tend to be kind of serious. But when I see Sue doing her thing to relax, to unwind, and maybe it's reading a funny book, or maybe it's finding funny memes on the computer, I just feel like I in so many ways, she's been teaching me like how important it is to feel light in your life and always turn back to humor. And I'm going to keep working on that theme in my life too. And I'm trying to pick out some funny things that I'm going to share as well as we go along. So that's family. And now to the big part of my life, which is my work. And I want to say it began with me working in New York City for my aunt. Actually, my aunt helped get me the job. My aunt Connie has quite a story. She started out as a nurse and then went on at Columbia Presbyterian to get her MD and was a pediatric cardiologist for many years at Columbia Presbyterian. And so she helped me get this job. And she, at that time, she had married my uncle, Ed Lewison, an engineer living in New Jersey. And so I stayed with her and his family and my cousin Laura. And we had this job where we were sitting in a long oblong office, and we were all about 4 or 5 of us were lined up along these counters with, and if you can imagine, it was in the 1980s. So we probably had these big IBM computers, with the big screens and not the fancy keyboards we have now. And I just remember my whole job was to sit there and type up, retype medical journals. And I don't even remember what I was doing, but after I finished that summer, I had some fun. Laura and I went out to play ultimate Frisbee. We ate dinner at some fun places. We watched TV with my aunt and uncle. I mean, there were fun stuff, but after working that job, I said, nope, I'm never going to do this job again. I don't want this kind of job. And from then on, I was searching what could be my job, and I started out with, maybe I'll be a broadcast news. Maybe I'll be a broadcaster. I'd seen that movie Broadcast News, and I thought, I have a nice radio voice. Maybe I'll do broadcast news. I even did an internship where I went around, and it was in Rochester. I went around and, had a little recorder, and I was interviewing people for WXXI. And after that, I thought, no, this doesn't work. So I started to explore more, and in my work at University of Rochester, I got a Bachelor of Arts in English. I saw a program to go to France, and I decided that I was going to go to France and just explore. I began learning French in my sophomore year, and then my junior year, I traveled to France and went to the Institut d'études européennes and lived there for about 6 months, in which time I met so many amazing people. I met some friends that I'll never forget. And I also tried my hand a little bit at teaching. And one of the teaching jobs I had, it was pretty easy because I was just a native speaker, but it was, I was working at I'm jumping up to my second France trip. Sorry, this was the first France trip. And after the first France trip, which was just my junior year, I came back. In that time, though, I welcomed my mother and my aunt to France and took them on a tour to the Riviera and to Paris. So that was a wonderful trip. But my second trip to France took me as to Rennes, France, where I was a assistant at a French university. And it was out of a program of twin cities, Rochester and Rennes. And there I had an amazing year. I started to dream in French and met so many amazing people, and definitely started to think about what it would mean to teach. So when I returned, I took a break for a year in Connecticut, lived with my sister for a little while, tried waitressing, and again realized, nope, I'm never going to do that again. I was horrible. But then jumped in to Literacy Volunteers and had my first chance to work. Sorry, everybody, jeepers. To work with a woman from Puerto Rico. And I started to realize maybe this was something for me. So I applied to University of Rochester and another school, and I got into University of Rochester, and thank goodness they pay for my
Have
tuition.
a good time.
Really glad. How much time do I have left?
Oh, let's
Do I
see here.
have enough time, or like, I'm looking at the clock here. I think I'm,
Yeah, I've got 10:45. We like to leave a little time at the end for questions. So, but you can take 5 or 6 more minutes and then wrap up.
okay, thank you.
How's that sound?
Sounds good. All right, so I have yeah. All right, so I'm trying to think where I was here. So after literacy volunteers, I came to University of Rochester and I finished my master's degree in TESOL. And then I started working in adult education and really enjoyed that and had a lot of autonomy, which is something I really liked about teaching. And then there were a lot of budget cuts. So I had to switch to different jobs in adult ed. And finally, you know, as Sue and I were coming together and beginning to build our lives together, I realized that I needed to get some work that was a little more stable. So I dove in with some trepidation. I dove into teaching ENL or ENL at a scholastic level. And I've gotten more used to that. And now I've been teaching there for about 18 years doing scholastic ENL. And I don't think I'm done. Sometimes I think maybe I am. You know, oh, I've got tenure. I've got this new group of kids. It's going to be so easy. It's not. I love how teaching is just constant learning and change. And it brings me back to the yoga experience, you know, how can I be flexible and stable at the same time? And that's what teaching calls for. And especially now, as we consider our own position as white people and the entrenched racism in our city schools and in our culture, in our school districts in general, I feel like there's a whole new opening for me to study and grow as a teacher, a whole new way. And that's been really jazzing me and pushing me through my the rest of my my current teaching work. And I just want to say that if you can sit with some kindergartners and figure out how to get them to say their letter names and work in how their different dolls they have with them that they happen to bring because their kindergarten teacher said they could bring in dolls that day. If you can figure out how to have them play with their dolls and work on their letter sounds, that's being stable and flexible at the same time. Thank you, everyone, for your attention. I was very emotive today, so I appreciate your attention anyway.
Thank you, Jenny. So do we have anyone that has any questions or comments this morning? Please raise your hand. I see Jack right here. You need to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Thank you. Tell us how you came to UUism.
We were looking for a church to begin to find community and to raise our children. And the principles of UUism spoke to us, particularly because the Catholic Church is not that tolerant of people who are gay. So I feel like the UUs offered an inclusive and validating everyone's dignity. And I also love that it included a variety of literature and ideas from across the world and across culture. not just Judeo-Christian ideas.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Mary,
I just wanted to thank you for telling the story about rowing in the boat. How many people were rowing with you that day?
7.
Oh, so it was an 8-person boat, and
Yeah.
do you still get to row some?
Not too much anymore. I mean, there's certainly that option. But I think it's just more, it's a signpost for me.
Well, I'm still glowing from that story, Jenny, because I have rowed some, and I agree, it's like flying. So thank you so much for projecting that across the airwaves. I'm still
Welcome.
smiling about it.
Howie. Are you unmuted? You're not. Please unmute.
Here, okay, here we go.
We got it.
Yeah, I couldn't decide, Jenny, whether to ask you more about the rowing, whether you regarded that as in any way as a spiritual or religious experience when you were in such flow with everybody and the environment. But the other question I was going to ask was, if you talk a little bit more about your and Sue's decision to have children and the method by which you would accomplish that.
Worse. The decision was the idea was initiated by Sue. And there's a little bit of a story in our family that Sue kind of pressed me to do various things. Like, first off, should we have chickens in our house? Not in our house, but in our backyard. And I would be like, why do we want to have chickens? I grew up in a suburban white neighborhood. I mean, we just went to the grocery store and bought eggs. But Sue, you guys maybe heard about Sue's life. She grew up in the country. And so, arguing, but Sue convinced me chickens were a good idea. And I still kind of tell the story of the same thing with the kids. I always want to have kids, Jenny. I'm like, why do you want to have kids? How are we going to have kids? But she convinced me, and man, I can't imagine it any other way. It was quite a interesting experience for me. Sue decided to be the birth mother, and we worked with the cryobank in Rochester, New York, Strong Memorial, and it was kind of wet. It was just kind of crazy, but she took medicine to help her ovulate, and then we kind of tracked when she was going to ovulate. We went in. She had alternative insemination, and luckily it took. And God, we had these amazing girls. And the other thing that is kind of amazing is we were able to use the same donor, so they're full sisters. And the girls, they don't show really any interest in about, finding. The donor was anonymous. I think there is an option though for the girls perhaps to see if they want to connect with any other siblings. But they haven't showed a lot of interest in that yet. But definitely they've got 2 moms and they know there's a donor, but that's the only part that. So,
Thank you.
thanks for the question.
Thank you. Do we have any other question? Oh, Deborah.
I'm struck by so many wonderful things that you shared, Jenny. In particular, starting off with recognizing the impermanence of things and how flow is there at the moment and then it's gone, and you have to appreciate the moment that you have it. So this is such a strong search in you. I'm wondering if some of your siblings have that same kind of urge and search for flow. You're muted. Oh, no, you're not. Sorry.
Yeah. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm not sure. Maybe I'm not in the way that I would talk about it, but the thing is, everybody gets flow. It's just that maybe you're not aware of it. You can get flow by having a great time playing a game with someone. You can get flow, you can get, the oneness by taking a walk and only listening to the birds. So, you know what? This means a lot to me. I think that's why I'm all verklempt. So, but honestly, I can't. I mean, I'm sure my siblings do, but I don't know if they would call it the same thing I call it. And I don't recall having a lot of discussions with them about it.
Deborah, you're unmuted again.
Yeah, I will say one of my favorite experiences is being the last person in an 8-person skull, and that moment when you're all together. And I've never found a way to describe that moment when everybody's in synchrony, and it doesn't, well, I was a beginner. It didn't last for long, but just those moments when you're all and you're moving, and it is just a remarkable experience. So thank you for capturing that.
You're welcome.
How are we doing for time? Anybody have a watch?
It's 10:57.
Okay. We have any other comments or questions? When you talked about flow, what came to mind was an experience that I had, which isn't exactly rowing, but we were in California, and I always do some research about places I might like to go. And I heard about, I think it's Mount Tamalpais. It's near the Sequoia Park outside of San Francisco, and it's a hill. You got there and there was this parking lot and there was this hill, seemed kind of strange, but you go up the hill and you can see the whole San Francisco Bay out in the distance, and there's the city, and it really gives you this amazing perspective of where one belongs in the world. And it was one of the things that I would consider flow, but it's not exactly the same thing.
Yeah, everyone can get it.
Yep, one way or another.
Yep.
Well, thank you very
You're
much.
welcome.
Really enjoyed your story, all the different elements of it, and you're willing to be open and just kind of go with it as it came.
Yeah.
And yes, thank you.
All right.
Much
Well, I look forward to
appreciated.
seeing everybody at church, and I'm glad to see you, and I hope we can connect more.
Yes, we will look for you when we get there.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bye.
Yes, bye. Next week, we have Greg North. I'm sorry. I was thinking about that. Yes, it's Greg North next time. And if you have